You all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
And keeping the palms joined. Keep the palms out. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good evening, everybody. It tells you how tired I am. I was thinking it was Saturday morning already. It's only Tuesday. Yeah. How's everybody doing? Doing all right. I said to somebody as they came in, I said, "How you doing?" They said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, these days, okay is we'll take that, right?" You know, it's interesting, like how difficult we can often make life. That's it. We really can just complicate things. And the place that get complicated the most is in our own heads. Like, it's amazing how we can sit there doing absolutely nothing, and yet in our head create like an entire just disaster in our head. You're just sitting there on the couch like eating chips, and all of a sudden in your mind, like the whole world is falling apart. And your only job at that moment is to sit and eat chips. Like, that's it. Just watch Netflix and eat chips. Okay? That's it. But we often can't even do that without our heads just ruining things. Who here likes chips? Who here likes Netflix or TV or movies? Just combine those two things and leave it at that. Like, if you're brand new to Buddhism, then, I'm sorry, because I'm talking about Netflix and chips. And so you're probably thinking, like, well, what does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with everything. When I talk about life being simple versus life being complicated, there is an example of how our everyday life, which is often complicated just in our own heads. And like at that moment of, okay, I'm just going to sit down and watch TV and eat potato chips, we can't even do those things and enjoy them because our minds are killing us. And for me, the very specific Zen practice, right? There's a great Zen expression that says, when hungry, eat, when tired, sleep. And I heard that years ago. And for, probably the first couple of years, I thought like, okay, well, if I'm hungry, I'm just going to eat. And if I'm tired, I'm just going to sleep. And that was it. But then I realized that expression meant so much more. And it really was about a million things. But the example I chose for whatever reason tonight was eating potato chips and watching Netflix. And assuming that that's not going to be the entirety of our lives, right? I mean, it might consume 10 hours of our day, but assuming that there might be a few other things that we do, try to treat all of those things the same way. Meaning, whatever we're doing at that moment in time, just do that thing, whatever it might be. It's so difficult for us. And the practice, when you kind of bring it back to the buzzwords of Buddhism and meditation and concentration and focus and staying present and be here now and all those like kind of fancy cliche Buddhist stuff, that's what it's talking about is, can we just stay present with something in each moment? And it's often so difficult because our minds have been just spinning 1,000 miles an hour for so many years. And it's really hard to just let the mind settle. And as we say, abide in sensation of breath. So what we're going to do here when we start meditation is work on and practice allowing the mind to settle into sensation of breath. But coming out of that, recognizing that we're not going to be in a seated meditation our whole lives, can we replicate that same practice in everything we're doing? Sit, abide in sensation of breath. Sit on the couch and eat chips. Sit and watch TV. Have a conversation. Whatever it is we're doing, can we just be fully engaged and present in that moment? Because if you are fully engaged in each moment and present with each moment, what are you not focused on? If you're focused on one thing, what are you not focused on? Everything else. And when you focus on everything else, how does that make you feel? You all said that at the same time and mumbled it, so I didn't hear it. But I'm going to go with yes, exactly. Did you say a mess? I think I heard a mess. Overwhelmed, a mess, same thing, right? It's overwhelming. And how much of your day do you spend thinking about everything going on in your life? Most of the day. And how do you feel most of the day? Overwhelmed. This sucks, right? I get it. I know that feeling. That was miserable, sitting around for years trying to figure out everything, trying to solve everything, trying to answer every question. It led to such a deep misery and depression. I was like, there's got to be some way out of this. You know? And then I fell into this stuff. And it taught me to just eat chips and watch Netflix. And life became a lot simpler. So since our projector is not on right now and I don't have any chips, we're going to go ahead and do some meditation practice. But if I'd thought about this talk in advance, I would have come prepared with a movie and chips. So I apologize. All of our millions of fans on Netflix, on YouTube, thanks for joining us. I can see you, so feel free to say hello to everybody else. And then when we get to questions, if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. And we'll go from there. So meditation practice, a couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You will not float away. You will not have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, if you are on a cushion, often will help slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. If you're on a bench or chair, same thing. Just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or on the lap, whatever is comfortable. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not try to stop the mind. Do not try to think nothing. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sound, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, Slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in or where we think we're going, our whole life is filled with things that happen. We react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. The night is young. You'll be lucky to make it home before you're disturbed. Maybe by each other. I saw you two look at each other. Sorry. I didn't want to pick on you, but I just saw that moment was like really cute, perfect timing. Right? We disturb our loved ones the most. Isn't that funny? No, I'm totally picking on you. Sorry. I'll continue. Right? But it's funny how those we know and love are the ones that can disturb us the most. You know? We disturb them the most. They disturb us the most. It's just the way it works. Strangers, they come and go all the time. The stranger that annoys you or bothers you, or the stranger that you annoy or bother. I often joke and say that, we're all here for various reasons, but, we have challenges and difficulties in our lives. And sometimes those challenges or difficulties have to do with people, right? Sometimes there are those people that challenge us and trigger us and cause us to end up at a meditation class on Tuesday night at 7:00. And often I joke that there's somewhere out there in some other land, somebody else at a meditation because of us. We're the ones that trigger them. And so it's important to recognize this dynamic, that there's this often state of being disturbed by others and disturbing others. But all of that is based on our reaction to what's going on. And so we practice meditation not to solve all of our problems or to fix anything. It's like anything else that we train. anything else that we're trying to make stronger, any, routines that are healthy that we're trying to build. We're trying to work on knowing what it's like, as I say during the meditation, to just sit and breathe. Because if we can practice just sitting and breathing more often and allow thoughts to come and go and arise and fall, and during this meditation for 20 minutes, we all had a million thoughts. But what did you do with those thoughts? Did anyone get up and yell at anyone during meditation? Right? I didn't hear it. You did it real quiet. Right? Did anyone argue with anyone during meditation? I'm not talking about what's going on in your head. Right? But no one in here yelled at anyone for 20 minutes. That's phenomenal. Congratulations. No one in here argued with anyone for 20 minutes. No one in here debated. No one in here tried to prove themselves. For 20 minutes, you were just silent and observing the craziness that's in here. Hopefully not mine, because there's a lot of crazy up here. All right? So that's what we practice. It's just being with the madness, being with the craziness, and showing ourselves, literally proving to yourselves, wow, I just sat for 20 minutes without any sort of unhealthy outbreak. That's phenomenal. Because many of us don't have 20-minute stretches throughout our day without snapping at someone or something, or being triggered or irritated or annoyed. I mean, so much of our days are filled with those things. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. And then recognizing that throughout our days, we have opportunities to be kind and compassionate towards others. We have opportunities to be mean and angry towards others. That's it. And if we choose more often throughout our day to be kind and compassionate, first to ourselves and then to others, your day might be a little gentler, a little kinder. But part of that process is removing this illusion we have, or attempt or effort we have to try to control what's going on around us. And so much of our time is trying to control the people that are around us and what they do and what they think and what they say and how they live. We have a hard enough time controlling ourselves. Yet so much effort is spent on what other people are doing. That's difficult to move past that. And just very honestly ask ourselves, what am I doing? I mean, that for me was one of the most beautiful practices that I had to wake up to. And it was also really painful. When you start to look at what you're thinking and what you're saying and what you're doing all day long, and you recognize that none of it is healthy and none of it is pleasant and none of it is kind. Well, maybe some of it was kind, but a little bit. It's a harsh reality to wake up to, but that's the start. And then we work from there. We pat ourselves on the back so we don't beat ourselves up too much and stop thinking we're complete failures. We're just human. And the beautiful thing is, the first thing the Buddha said is that you're going to suffer. So right there, we're cool, I'm in. Most people get that part. We're going to struggle throughout our lives. That is part of this journey. But it doesn't have to be all of our journey, and it doesn't have to be most of our journey. It can be a part of it. So he taught for us to explore why we suffer, our greed, our anger, and our ignorance. And then he taught us to practice generosity and compassion and wisdom. And he taught us to pay attention to our karma, to what we think and say and do. And to be aware of what's coming from pure intention and what's coming from selfish intention. So, and that's why it's a practice. It's not something that all of a sudden overnight you're okay, boom, I get it, my whole life is different. It takes time. But I've talked a lot recently about Samantabhadra, the bodhisattva over here with the elephant. It represents great practice, great diligence, great effort, and allowing ourselves to be patient as we continue to work at being kinder, gentler people to ourselves and others. Be patient with yourself. It's not easy, but be diligent. Keep showing up. Whatever showing up means to you, I don't necessarily mean show up here Tuesday at 7. I mean, it's great you all do, but that's not my point. Show up to practice in your own way, whatever that means to you. Show up to people and places and things that are healthy for you, that cultivate a sense of spiritual practice and a sense of joy. Show up to those places and those people. Because that really has a strong impact on our daily lives. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I really just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And again, to our millions of YouTube followers, welcome. Good to see you all. As I said earlier, there's a chat box on your screen. Feel free to, introduce yourselves, say hello to the others. And if you have questions, type them in here and I'll do my best to respond to that as well. So questions, anything you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening for that. Yeah.
What's a good practice for working through triggers?
A good practice for working through triggers, is that what we said?
Yeah, I would say breathing.
Besides breathing, because you're like, darn, that hasn't worked yet. So let me let me ask a question back just so I can fully clarify, understand. When you say working through triggers, do you mean when triggers occur, like you're aware of it and what to do at that moment?
Yeah.
Versus like prior or post or something like that?
I mean, right now my initial thought was, in the midst of it or learning reaction.
For sure.
Your response.
So there's a great acronym that I heard years ago, and it's, I think, for things like this, incredibly beneficial. And I don't even know the source of this, and I always used to say that I'm going to find it out, and I never looked, and I just stopped. So all credit to whoever created this, but I think it's really wonderful. It's sober. I don't know if you ever heard me talk about this before, but in moments where you're triggered and like, boom, it's like your whatever levels are just through the roof and you're about to snap, whatever that means. And you feel it physically, mentally, emotionally, you know it. So the word sober, the first one is to stop. Just completely stop, whatever it is. Like, to me, when I heard that, what it meant was physically stop. So very often when we're triggered, maybe now obviously if you're driving, don't like slam on the brakes. But, if you're driving and it's safe and all of a sudden you're triggered by something, slow down and pull over, right? If you're walking, you're triggered, you're in a conversation, you're moving, like literally just stop everything. Set things down. If you're at the computer or your phone, just stop. And the O is to observe. Observe what's happening to you in that moment. This will be important for like reinforcing this habit, because you have to observe, like, okay, what's going on right now? Like, is my heart racing? Are my hands like, in fists? Is like I don't know, whatever. Like, just observe what's happening. I ran out of examples, but there's two of them. Right? Is my heart racing or am I making a fist? Observe what's going on. And these all happen pretty quickly, by the way, but, I'll walk through them anyways a little bit slower. And the third one is to breathe. So you've stopped. You've observed what's going on. I'm angry. I've got my hands in a fist, and I want to punch somebody. Breathe. And this is critical. Take a few deep breaths. Because you're breathing, obviously, during this, or you wouldn't be alive. But it's not just like breathe the rapid breath of anger. Deep breaths, right? I guess SODBER is not a word, but take a deep breath. A couple of them in that moment. And then the E is to expand. And for me, I mean, they're all critical, but I think this one's really important also. To expand, meaning come out of that moment where you think your entire life is that moment. Because when we are triggered, and I'm just talking from personal experience, when I was younger and I'd get really angry and something would trigger me and I just want to punch them. Like, that's, the whole world is just that one moment. It's just that person, me, my emotions, and boom. And nothing else exists in that moment. So expand is to recognize that life is so much more than that simple moment that we're feeling that trigger, or that trigger is causing us to feel the emotions. To expand, super important. To recognize that that moment will pass. You know, you've heard me talk about this, but I spent 20 years working in prisons, and just about every single person I've ever met and worked with in there, they said if they had just thought for 2 more seconds before they did whatever they did, they wouldn't be spending their life in prison. If they had just realized there was something greater than that one simple moment, their life would be drastically different. But very often we don't. We think that moment is it. So we don't have the ability to expand beyond that moment. And then the last one is the R, and that's respond. How are we now going to respond? And if we've taken the time, even if it happens pretty quickly, if we've taken the time to stop, if we've taken time to observe our physical, mental, emotional state in that moment, if we've taken the time to have a few deep breaths, if we've taken the time to expand, to recognize that our whole life is not that one moment, and then we respond, we can respond in a kinder, gentler way. And sometimes respond can mean just go, remove yourself. Again, every situation is unique and different. We're triggered, in all different ways and places and times, But I've found that to be very helpful. Especially early on when things just really trigger you constantly. And does that make sense so far? And kind of an added part to that, and that's why I asked the follow-up question, a big part of being triggered is doing things in your daily life, like meditation, that help decrease and minimize the amount of times and ways that we are triggered. So it's one thing to say, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do when I'm triggered. But if you're triggered all day long by every single person and thing that happens, you're going to be doing a lot of stopping, observing, breathing, expanding, and responding. So ideally, in time, with practice, we want to be triggered less. And part of that is to figure out, well, how do I get triggered less? Well, we get triggered less by recognizing that other people are important also. Other people have thoughts and views that don't align with ours. Other people do things that are not so kind, just like us. So part of learning to no longer, I think probably more practical to say, part of learning to be triggered less is recognizing that, hey, people are doing the best they can. And we know what it's like to trigger others. So, yeah, I hope that's helpful. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
So how does the meditation practice end up leading to being triggered less? Like, do you focus on like a specific trigger at a time, or just over time do you just kind of just happens?
Yeah. So the question was, how does meditation specifically lead to being triggered less, right? And does it happen like individually.
Yeah, in terms of like focusing on a specific trigger and kind of working that way, or is it just kind of
Yeah.
I'm working on all my triggers right now?
Yeah, no, I could tell. That's why I kind of laughed along with you. Not at you with you, but you seemed to ask that question as if you had many triggers.
Yes.
Yes, great. I didn't want to assume anything, but by your laughter, I kind of, it seemed to come across that way. So it's, for me with this practice, it's actually the opposite of what you just said. Like what you said was, do I focus on one trigger at a time? Right? No. The practice is to ultimately, and bear with me here, is to recognize that there are no triggers. So now I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting everything I just said. There's only one trigger, my friend. And what is that? Go ahead.
It's you.
You, not me. The only trigger. There's one trigger and one trigger only. And I'll make this make sense, hopefully, eventually, contradicting everything I just said. The only trigger is your thoughts. So there's the trigger, which is a thing that happens. That's what we refer to a trigger as. And then there's our thoughts. The thought is the real problem, not the thing that happened. Things that happen around us that we say trigger us are going to be there our whole life. So the question of, well, how do I then, one at a time, if I have 17 things that trigger me, you don't work on minimizing the 17 things. You work on the only real trigger, which is your thoughts and your mind. And the way we do that is through a meditation practice. Now, let me explain this a little more. Specifically with meditation. So let's say, and this is my practice, right? Breath in, breath out. The Buddha taught very simply, Anapanasati Sutra, he said, when breathing in, taking a short breath, know you're breathing in, taking a short breath. If breathing out, taking a long breath, know you're breathing out, taking a long breath. Meaning, simply focus on observation and sensation of breath. So this is what I'm working on during meditation. Breath in, breath out. Breath in, breath out. Thought arises. Recognize it, release it. Back to the breath. Breath in, breath out. I've been doing this practice every day for 19 years, right? And my mind goes crazy and races 1,000,000 miles an hour during meditation. But you begin to recognize it. Thought arises, hunger. I'm hungry. Release that thought, back to the breath. Breath in, breath out. Hunger. Recognize it, release it, back to the breath. So that thought of hunger is no different than the person screaming at you who's pissing you off. They're just thoughts, observations, awarenesses of what's going on around us, and our ability or inability to bring our mind back to the present moment. The triggers are irrelevant completely. I get it from a psychological standpoint, therapy standpoint, we have triggers all over us. I get it. But this is beyond that, ultimately. So let me finish the example. Thought arises, hunger, release, back to the breath. What I don't want to do, thought arises, hunger. I'm hungry. What do I want to eat? I want a burrito. I want to go to Pokey's. I haven't been there in a long time. They have good burritos. I want chips. I'd like sauce. I'd like some water. One single thought of hunger, I'm sitting there for 5 minutes thinking about the burrito I want to eat. And now I'm hungrier than I was 5 minutes ago. Because now I'm thinking about eating burritos. Okay? Just from the simple thought of hunger. Every trigger is the same way. Our entire life. Again, I'm giving you the ultimate, and then you can kind of work back to how do I make this make sense? And that's with the sober type stuff. But ultimately, when you look at Buddhist teachings, our entire life is nothing more than a series, an endless causal relationship to all phenomena. Meaning every single thing that happens is the cause of some other effect. And every effect is the next cause. Everything in our lives. You were triggered just coming here. The problem is we tend to look at the way we use the word trigger as if it's a problem. I mean, and again, I get it. When you raise questions and ask about triggers, that tells all of us, like, this is a trigger that's going to set me off in a bad direction. But there are also triggers that got you here today, right? Were you at home before you got here?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have a thought that said, I'm going to go to meditation?
Yes.
That's a trigger. You were triggered.
How do you discriminate from good triggers that?
Yes. That's a great question. How do you discriminate between, instead of looking at good or bad, the Buddha would talk about things as pleasant or unpleasant, healthy or unhealthy. Very easy for in most cases. Your question was, how do you determine, right? You ever done anything harmful in your life?
Sure.
Do you usually know that it's harmful?
Not always before I do it.
Well, no, let's be careful here. Not always before you do it, meaning you didn't intend to harm someone and they ended up getting harmed. So let me just speak for myself. Almost every time I've done something that was unhealthy or harmful, I knew it in advance. I knew what I was going to do or say was unhealthy or harmful. I still chose to do it, but I was very well aware of what I was doing, being healthy or unhealthy, harmful or unharmful, right? We don't know the impact it's going to have. A lot of times we do things that are harmful and we get away with it, but I still knew it was harmful, right? So the discriminating mind is really important in Buddhist practice, which comes to wisdom, is to recognize what I'm about to say, think, and do. Is it healthy or unhealthy, pleasant or unpleasant, beneficial to self and others or harmful to self and others? We usually know these things most of the time. It doesn't mean we're good at doing it, right? Thought arises, well, this is unhealthy. I shouldn't do this. And I do it anyways. You ever been there? So again, I don't want to get inside your mind too much at all, really, but I believe through practice, most of us recognize what we're about to do is healthy or unhealthy. It's our inability to stop ourselves and to control what we're about to do that the real problem, then the real problem comes into play. So again, coming back to the triggers, our entire life, every moment is a trigger. You ask a question, I give a response, that's a trigger. Your question, my response. My response now triggers more thoughts. Your thoughts trigger your next thoughts, which trigger your next actions. This is our karma. The practice is to cultivate wisdom and compassion. So what we do with these triggers comes from a place of wisdom and compassion, not from a place of anger and ignorance. Sounds so simple. What do you think?
Not to think about it.
There you go. Along the lines of thinking, and I'll close with this thought about thinking. The Zen master Dogen talked about beyond thinking and abiding in sensation of breath. And this is really, I've found to be one of the most beautiful practices, because this idea, coming back to my kind of metaphor at the beginning of just watching Netflix and eating chips, is that if we can just go beyond pondering everything. For me, when I came into Buddhist practice, I wanted to figure it out. Like there was some great wisdom out there to uncover or learn. And that if I learned about something that was outside of me that started 2,500 years ago in a faraway land, that if I could learn and figure all of that out, that's what I thought this practice was about. And for me, the most beautiful teaching I ever got when I first started from my master, and she said, Jeff, go beyond thinking. Because, as I alluded to earlier, the thoughts that we have, as the Buddha said, mind is the forerunner of all evil. The thoughts we have is what creates so much stress and chaos and drama in our own hearts and our own minds. So learning to be present and going beyond thinking, sitting around thinking about all day long, stuff all day long is going to destroy us. So, but I get it. There's a balance of, okay, well, I have to think about this stuff before I can stop thinking about this stuff. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but yeah. If you're newer to Buddhism, we can often complicate it by trying to understand it. And ultimately, the practice isn't about understanding Buddhism or anything else. It's about understanding yourself. It's about getting to know you, why you think and say and do what you do. And when you begin to understand your thoughts, your words, your actions, your karma, that's what karma is, just your thoughts, your words, your actions. When you begin to understand that, then you begin to change. But it takes time. So anything else before I close? All right, so we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained be transferred to nearly 6 million lives that were lost during this pandemic, and to their family and friends who continue to suffer at this time, and to all of those in Ukraine and surrounding areas who suffer. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out or jump off. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers. We're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our unenlightened views of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So thanks for showing up. Every night we have different practices going on. I do this Tuesday. Alex does a metta, loving kindness practice on Wednesday. Travis does Dharma Bum Basics meditation Thursdays. And then online still we have our Tonglen practice on Sunday nights. And Ken is here doing a Zen practice on Monday nights. So Monday through Friday, every morning we sit here at 8 and 8:30. So if you want to just come sit in silence for 25 minutes or, 2 sessions, that's great as well. And then recovery Sangha, anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, or just life, that's Tuesday night downstairs and Sunday morning up here. That's all on the website. The schedule's there. Appreciate you being here. Please be safe. And you have all night to let nobody disturb you. So be nice to each other. Good luck. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Good night.